want to be able to tweak. There are ideas that you will have along the way that are important to hear, maybe suggestions, things that we need to process together. And then we want to also, we want to catch areas, welcome here, we want to catch areas of non-compliance and figure out how to rectify those areas. Okay. Plan to Protect is not about us not trusting you. It's about our community trusting us. And actually, I keep saying that, number one, we want to create a safe environment, a safe place for our clients, and that's the word I use, clients, whether it's children, young people, or vulnerable adults. We want to create a safe place for them. But we also want to, and just as important, we want to protect you as the volunteers from false accusations. And thirdly, here's the way I look at it. You can never 100% foolproof something, but if Church A does a sloppy job and Church B is very methodical about crossing the T's and dotting the I's, if an incident comes up, which church do you think will get the benefit of the doubt? I think we know the answer to that one. So part of our process is also an effort to make sure that we get the benefit of the doubt in case something arises. So we'll talk quickly about awareness. I think we know about this. Who needs protection? I think I mentioned them. Who are they? Children, teens and young adults, and seniors, vulnerable seniors, people with disability, anyone that would be considered disadvantaged or underneath someone that has power that can be abused. What is abuse? And I'll talk about that in a bit, and then how to prevent it. Abuse refers to an act committed by a parent, caregiver, or person in a position of trust which is non-accidental, which harms or threatens to harm someone's physical or mental health or someone's welfare. Actually, I think abuse can happen even if it isn't under somebody that has authority or power or whatever. And actually, abuse can include a lot of other things: emotional, spiritual, financial, etc. So it's actually a fairly broad category. Internationally, 1 in 4 people report having been physically abused as children. 1 in 5 women and 1 in 13 men report having been sexually abused. I had a few other slides with stats. When we say 1 in 4 people report having been physically abused as children, well, if getting a spanking qualifies me as having been physically abused as a child, then I guess I'm part of the statistic. Okay, so what do we categorize? What do we label as abuse? And in Canada, you are allowed to spank up to a certain age. Okay, but we know where things are going. I think we'll just skip over this. It's pretty obvious that there is a tremendous problem with sexual abuse. How many of you watched the movie Sound of Freedom? Okay. You may want to, or you may not want to watch that. It has to do with especially with child trafficking. And obviously they don't show scenes of trafficking because that would be sexual abuse in and of itself. They actually focus on the perpetrators more so. But it's a sobering story about what's going on in our world. And it's actually a more lucrative business than even the drug trafficking, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Around 1 in 6 people 60 years and older experienced some form of abuse in the community settings during the past year, according to World Health Organization. And in other words, seniors are also vulnerable. This is a challenging area for me, even as a pastor, to go visit some of our seniors. If they qualify as vulnerable adults, then I can't actually go by myself. Now, to give you an example, I really can't go visit Marcella by myself because she's a woman and I'm a man. And for me to go, but she's not, in my view, she's not a vulnerable adult because she has all of her mental faculties and right. But if I go visit someone that has dementia, well, now they're very vulnerable, and so there are challenges here even for pastoral care. What does that look like? Individuals with disabilities are twice as likely to experience violent victimization as able-bodied people, and of course that's why we talk about increasing supervision when disabilities are part of it. Okay, prevention, and we want to talk more about these last two than the first ones. How can we prevent abuse from happening in the first place? How can we prevent false allegations? Any thoughts about what are some of the things that we do to prevent abuse from happening in the first place? Off the top of your head, what do we do?
We do this training.
Okay, we do the training, that's one thing. So we do training. What else?
Accountability and supervision.
Accountability and supervision, good.
I think the church does things from a physical standpoint, like putting windows and doors.
Okay, so the physical premises, exactly, we adjust that with that in mind. Anything else?
Screening the volunteers.
Okay, we screen or vet our volunteers. Yeah, perfect.
Do things in tandem, usually you're not alone, right?
Okay, so we try to avoid isolation. Okay, good. Those are all good ways to prevent abuse from happening in the first place. How can we prevent false allegations?
Keep good records.
Keep good records.
Follow the plan to protect.
Follow the protocol. So again, no isolation, good supervision, etc. Okay. Anything else come to mind?
Bury the story on the 27th page.
Come again?
When he reads to the 27th page. No, I'm kidding.
I guess you will never be able to 100% protect yourself against a false accusation. Those can happen. But having good documentation, making sure that you follow the steps to not only protect the client, but to protect yourself. See, at the end of the day, it's that paperwork that's going to be what's going to carry the day in court. So we're not being ornery or difficult when we require paperwork that we have to keep it forever, because there's zero statute of limitations on sexual abuse accusations. Meaning that my dad, who's lying in a hospital in Vita right now at 93 years of age, if somebody would say that she was sexually abused by my dad 85 years ago, that would go to court. That would get processed. There's zero statute of limitations. So the only thing that will protect you, he said, she said, is documentation, right? So that's why it's important. Okay, who can be placed in a position of trust and leadership? Typically, we have a 6-month waiting period, meaning that you wouldn't be able to walk into EFC on Wednesday and then teach a Sunday school class on Sunday. If we don't know you, we have to get to know you. Now, if you grew up in the church, then we know you, okay? An application, an interview, references, police check, this training, and then the final approval. Okay, so yeah, it is a bit of a process, but it helps us to be able to demonstrate that we've tried to be careful in vetting. Okay. What activities, programs, or events do we have that are higher risk?
Youth.
Okay, and what activities or programs in the youth?
Small groups.
Small group. Abundant Springs, field trips.
Yeah, anything off.
Anything off-site would be considered a little higher risk. That time that you guys went skydiving. Right, so what about for kids? Sorry?
Children's church would be high up there because you're alone with children, and
Yeah.
I don't know what
Taking them to the
diaper
bathroom.
duty
the
looks
bathroom.
like. I don't know what
Yeah.
that is.
Following the
Right.
bathroom protocol and all that, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And what areas in our church would we consider higher risk? You've already mentioned one of them. The washrooms. Okay. What else?
Anywhere a door can close. Really?
Especially, yes, and especially a door without a window, like the furnace room,
Yes.
Yeah.
or the closet, or the supply, like any door that doesn't have a window, and especially any door that does not have a window to a room that isn't normally entered. Right? Yeah. Okay. Age groups, we already talked about that. So how do we reduce risk? Just some general principles. As risk increases, supervision should also increase. So the next time you're skydiving, 3 adults should skydive with each child. No, you wouldn't take one adult with 12 kids swimming at St. Malo. Okay, I'm exaggerating to make a point. But you might take 12 kids outside to Abe's Hill to kick a soccer ball around. But right, there's a big difference in risk. Risk increases, isolation increases. So if you're isolated as a group, if I'm driving kids home, that's isolation. Risk is increased, right? Risk increases, accountability decreases. So if there's no accountability, there's no supervision, there's isolation. Those are all factors that increase risk. Risk increases when there is an imbalance of power, authority, influence, and control between a potential abuser and a potential victim. Okay, so I'm too young to remember this era, but I've heard or understood that back in the day, in some Mennonite circles, women didn't really want to go forward at a crusade because they didn't want to end up alone with the pastor in his office. That's a terrible commentary. Okay, risk. And especially an imbalance of power. Okay. So maintain good documentation. That's your best line of defense to prevent abuse and also prevent false accusation. So how do we do it with supervision? 2 screened workers for 6 infants, 0 to 17 months, or for 10 toddlers, for 20 elementary age kids, 14 junior high, 20 senior high. Notice the number dips back down for junior high because they are more vulnerable. They still haven't figured out who they are. And so they're vulnerable. Okay, so you need to keep that in mind. Vulnerable adults, and then again, children with disabilities. Notice a minimum of 2 unrelated personnel. So my wife and I don't qualify as 2 personnel because we're related. Thanks, Carla Hamolka. Except in an emergency, or 1 personnel with windows having clear lines of visibility, or an open door with hall monitors. So in other words, you can manage this if you have children's church or a Sunday school. If there's a hall monitor, that gets you through this, okay? Because there is supervision, okay? Otherwise, you're struggling having enough personnel to manage it. Any questions about that part? Does that make sense? Okay. Oh. As far as vulnerable adults go, schedule home visits when a caregiver is present if you can. Keep hospital nursing home doors open and avoid pulling curtains. Again, isolation is the problem. And if no one else is present, visit in groups of 2. I'm always happy personally if I make a hospital visit and there's somebody else there. That's kind of nice, especially a family member or whatever. And again, I mean, then I get to also talk to the family member or be an encouragement to them, right?
As far as seniors is concerned.
Yeah,
I went to visit your dad,
okay,
and then, in Vida,
yeah,
but I took, John Sawaski along,
yeah,
because I had something that, we wanted to do.
yeah,
We wanted to sing,
okay,
and so that was,
yeah,
but I didn't document it.
yeah,
Can I just say something to that?
yeah,
That was you going to go and visit. That was not Ernie phoning you and it being a church program and you doing it.
right,
There is a difference. Like, our personal lives do not need to have,
right. So, for instance, for me, as a pastor, now my visits actually technically fall under a program of the church. Yours not so much, because you're not a paid pastor in the church doing the visitation.
But I am a leader of
Right.
the seniors.
Right. So I would say it, for instance, in this case, just keep it in mind. For instance, we have a number of widows in our church. I don't typically go visit by myself, just out of an abundance of caution. I'm not worried about an accusation technically. I'm not worried about some untoward behavior either. It's just trying to be as professional in that way as possible. I guess my dad would qualify as a vulnerable adult because he doesn't always know what day it is or where he is. He can phone me actually right now and tell me he needs me to pick him up because he's at the lake. Right, so he is vulnerable. Now, fortunately, in another way, he has zero access to any of his finances. So the risk I have right now with him is his cell phone. but nobody can scam him or mom because neither of them can have the wherewithal to get at their money. So I worry less about all the scam calls they get. When meeting off-site, meet in public, preferably. If you're meeting off-site, you certainly want to document. Likely, if I'm talking about youth and children, you would like parental consent if you're going to meet off-site, and then document. That also will help protect you. Avoid traveling alone, always travel in groups. Youth leaders, if you have a child that comes to youth and their ride home just went south and they need a ride home, well, you can't just leave them here unsupervised in the church and say, here's a pillow, see you tomorrow. You can't do that. But what you can do, we have the technology. So if I'm driving you home, I call your mom or your dad and I say, okay, I've got my phone on speakerphone. Please keep this line open for the next 10 minutes while I drive your child to your house. Now we have the open door working. Okay, it's called a cell phone, but it's the open door. And then I would document exactly what I did, and then I think that would be okay. Now that's a one-off. I'm not sure that I would want to bring your daughter home every single week from youth. Then I'd probably be looking for some other alternative. And if there was no other alternative, then I'd get a female youth leader to bring your daughter home, right? So in other words, look for things that work, but then also take the precautions you need. Record keeping, we've talked about this a little bit. Registration forms, and I think Bertha has registration forms for Children's Church and also for Sunday School. They're already available, so parents can fill those out ahead of time. That maybe just helps speed up the process. you also want to get parental permission for all high risk activities, like the skydiving I referred to. You want to do that, and then don't let anybody sign on behalf of that child. That needs to be a parent. Okay.
Ernie,
Yep.
do we have to re-register every year?
Yes.
Or, yeah, okay.
I believe so. And
And the reasoning is for that is we don't know who has custody of a child. From one year to the next, like that could change. So that is a requirement.
probably 30 years ago, when we visited my brother in Chicago at an E-Free church, they were already using a process where you handed your kid across a half door in Sunday school, and then your spouse couldn't get that kid back. It had to be the parent that dropped the kid off, had to be the parent that picked them up. Why? Because you never know who's got custody, this, that, and the other thing. And so they were already back then following some very strict protocols regarding children. The other thing is attendance records and stuff like that. And by the way, like for youth, I would say Thursday, after Thursday's activities, Thursday night, slip those papers under Bertha's door. Technically, it should be day of. Like, it won't look good if we get paperwork a month after the fact. That looks a little bit like it's been doctored, or like I'm trying to remember what happened or whatever. Technically, it should be day of. And if Bertha's not here and her office door is locked, just slip it under her door. So Sunday after Sunday school, children's church, just slip your registration form, your incident reports, slip it all under her door, and it'll get on her desk. And then she will enter it in the system and also keep a hard copy for that. Okay? Any questions about those forms and stuff like that? And I think Sunday school, maybe even children's church, you guys are working with an iPad, like for some of that, trying to expedite some of that attendance stuff. Okay. Okay, we've already talked about this, about taking attendance and maintaining records. If you have the occasional observer, like a parent, either at youth or Sunday school or whatever, it's not like they can't come, but you need to be clear to either the parent or the observer or the visitor that as a visitor, they can't take a child to the washroom. They can't, in other words, they can be there, but they can't function as if they were a vetted worker. So, you know, don't get yourself caught having them do that, and then potentially you are in trouble.
And they also need to be written into the attendance sheet that they were there.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Receiving and releasing, monitor children under 6 with sign in and sign out with location of parents. I remember that church in Chicago, they had a little, like a shot clock at the hockey rink, and if the number 16 was all of a sudden came up, that meant the parent that had number 16 child, there was a problem and they needed to leave the sanctuary. So they had process of communicating, and we don't really do that, but we're small enough maybe that we're okay. Don't leave the children unattended, and also children shouldn't really be dropped off in a Sunday school classroom until teachers are there. Which probably means if you're a Sunday school teacher, and if Sunday school starts at 9:45, it won't do for you to show up at 9:46 or 9:45. I always kind of take, well, whatever, this is a little different here now, but I take the opinion with something like that, if you're not 15 minutes early, you're late. Quentin is with me, at least we're old school. Well, the thing is that I don't need stress. So I don't show up 5 minutes before my plane is getting ready to leave the tarmac. Like, I just don't need, like, I would rather show up an hour early and sit down with my Tim's coffee and relax. I can relax there just as well as at home. and now I haven't got the stress. So I prefer to treat life that way. Just be early. Okay. As far as when kids can go to their parents by themselves, I guess you can gauge that or ask the parent what their wishes are. If they're at that age, then ask the parent, are you okay with your kid finding you after the service, or what's your preference? And then work with that. Washroom guidelines. This is always one of those great areas, right? In the nursery, I changed a diaper the other day. I'm really happy to not have to do that. Apparently they're giving Nixon iron. So it was a black, slimy mess that was halfway up his back, and I couldn't manage with 3 or 4 wipes, and I was trying to keep from getting myself dirty and the change table dirty. What's that?
Too much information.
Yeah, no kidding, eh? Cut it out. But here too, you want to be, if the parents are there, encourage parents to change the diaper, and if not, then get permission. And I think that it should be done by an adult personnel with other people in view. Okay, so kind of be careful with that. Preschool, their preschool children are not to go to the washroom alone. Take a group of them and escort them, or have a hall monitor. And if they need assistance, prop the door open, etc. And kind of protect their privacy, but be available to help if help is needed. Again, avoid isolation. With elementary children, they shouldn't go into the washroom alone. They should be accompanied by a buddy. You can escort 2 children and prop the outside door open, and then remain outside the washroom door. You can do it that way. Vulnerable adults, I think we're not in a situation where we need to really worry about that too much. If you go and visit a senior in a care home, don't offer to change their Depends or whatever. Like, don't get involved. It's not for us. Allergies, I think we're trying to be fairly careful finding out and documenting allergies. Some allergies can be really life-threatening. I noticed at SCS there, the list of kids in the elementary school with like peanut allergies and stuff like that was pretty significant, and EpiPens and whatnot. So I'm not sure how many we have here, but we do need to find out who has allergies, what those allergies are, and then take the required steps. And if you're dealing with people with allergies, and if they have an EpiPen, you also need to know how to administer it. Blue to the sky, orange to the thigh, right. If someone is ill or has symptoms of the flu, etc., and we're probably more hypersensitive after COVID about stuff like this, but hopefully parents will keep their kids home when they're sick. They shouldn't be contaminating other people. Hopefully. I'm not sure what you guys would suggest if a child shows up and they're obviously not well. What do you do? Like, you encourage the parent not to leave the child because they're sick, and then you have upset parent, but you don't either want to risk having a bunch of other kids sick. So yeah, I hope parents will be conscientious about that. Medication, don't give medication without written authorization by a parent or a physician. That includes inhalers and EpiPens and all of that other stuff. Yeah.
So for youth leaders, if like a youth has a headache or whatever else, are we allowed to give them Advil or Tylenol?
If we can get a hold of the parent to ask or something? Cause
Or
even
just
at,
nothing.
even at camp, you have to sign in their Advil and Tylenol.
In,
And it has to
in,
be,
do
and it
halls.
has, and halls, it needs to be administered by the nurse.
right, and I think even in the event that someone would need a Tylenol, it would need to be written down. And probably permission.
Yeah.
I'm, like, you're not gonna have a nurse, unless you're all of a sudden you hit the lottery, you're not gonna have a nurse at youth events every single week. Unless one of your sponsors or youth workers happens to be a nurse, right? So I think if you are running into a case where somebody is habitually needing something for a headache, that requires a conversation with a parent. And with some fairly clear instructions that the parent signs off on, in my mind. Yeah. And here again, by the way, okay, whether we're talking children, Sunday school, children's church, youth, questions like this that you have, if you're really smart, go to your ministry lead. Like, bump it up the ladder. Get advice or get another opinion from your ministry lead. Don't just wing it on your own, because now you're hung out to dry. You made a decision on your own and you didn't get advice and you didn't take it to your ministry lead. So I would always say, when in doubt, talk to your ministry lead. So
Kids take different medications
Yep.
sometimes, and you don't know if they're allowed to take Tylenol or Advil. I think it's important to consult the parents,
yeah,
just in case.
and we don't even know if they're allergic to one of those, right? We don't know if they're allergic to one. We don't even know if they took a Tylenol or an Advil right before getting here. Now they want to take another one. Like, so there's a lot of variables there. I think you're right. It'd be a good idea to talk to the parents before that. It would be interesting if they're carrying that with them. If they're not, they're asking you if you have. Well, I think you'd still need to call the parent.
And then an incident report.
Yep.
done.
Yep. Anything out of the normal, always an incident report. Yeah. Who, where, what, why, how. Yeah. Okay. We probably don't have a lot of overnight stays other than Abundant Springs. And Abundant Springs, they're following some pretty significant protocols with the nurse and handing in medications and stuff like that. So I don't know that we need to go through that part. I think, and camp as well, they follow some pretty strict guidelines to protect against things like that. Okay, documentation, incident reports. Fill out an incident report for any accidents, injuries, illness, or indicators. So Johnny banged his knee against a chair and he's got a bruise on his knee. Write it down. Write down what happened, who saw it, etc. What it was. Because a week later, he says that you hit him on his knee. Okay, well, you didn't document anything. Now what? Write it down. Any injury, any accident, any abnormal behavior, anything that's out of the ordinary. So if a kid is acting out and they normally don't, write down an incident report. Because then you can also go back later on and you say, 3 times in a row, this child has been acting out and this is abnormal activity. What's going on? Now you have a reason for investigating or wondering or consulting because you've done diligence with the incident reports and you've also protected yourself.
Can I ask, we've done this for a few years in our church already.
Yeah.
Are we seeing incident reports being processed in Sunday school or children's church?
We are getting them from youth. I have not gotten any from Sunday school or children's men.
Okay. Here's, and you will, from your line of work, you will understand this, I think. We had, what's it called, that Diamond, this program, health and safety or whatever. If in a year there are no incident reports submitted, then the people that supervise this stuff say you guys aren't doing diligence. In other words, you're not filling them out, or you're lying, or you're faking it, because incidents happen. So actually, the reality of an incident report isn't always a negative. It actually shows that we're doing diligence. So if we go through 3 years without an incident report, somebody's raising their eyebrows, because that's not real, right? So don't feel like, oh, this wasn't a big deal. Why would I write out an incident report? Well, yeah, actually, it's a good idea to write out an incident report, because they actually even serve to prove that we're taking this whole thing seriously. They actually help us in that way. And they also help you later on when things start to become suspicious for different reasons, to piece things together, right? Off-site trips and retreats, get pre-approval, written permission for sure. Increase your supervision. And that last one, female and male youth and staff are not allowed in each other's rooms or tents. Yeah, in other words, follow some pretty, what I would call common sense. But common sense is a flower that doesn't grow in everyone's garden, so it's best that we just say it, right? Yeah.
So what if you are going to some program that
Yep.
has a different policy? Which policy stands firm? Do we still have to follow Plan Protect, or do we follow what we're doing, where we're going?
Okay, like, are you talking about going to another
For
church?
example, like SBC,
Yeah.
they run a program like what's it called now? Whatever, this fun thing they
Yeah.
do now, and they go around in vehicles, they go to the museum and stuff like that. What was it called now?
Impact?
Expedition.
Or Expedition Now.
Yeah.
And so their requirement is that there's 1 leader per 4 students in a vehicle.
Yeah.
So do we
Okay.
still need to have 2 leaders with 3 students? How does that work? Because their policy is different than ours.
Okay, now this is their program.
Yeah. And it was going from SBC to the Mennonite Heritage Museum and back to SBC.
Okay.
Would they have like their own permission forms and things like that?
I'm sure. What did they sign last year?
We signed something,
They had to sign
yeah.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, as a parent, we signed whatever the provision form through for that event was.
Yeah.
So technically, we're signing off on their
Yeah.
SBC.
policy.
I feel like the onus is on SBC then, isn't it?
I think as long as you're the youth, the directors, you would be clear with the parents that the protocol is different. Would that make sense?
Yeah. See.
Like if Jen knows
Yeah.
that the protocol is gonna be different than
Yeah.
what our plan to protect is, and she signs off on it.
Then that's on
To
me,
me, then
yeah.
that's on you,
Yeah,
correct?
because Robin has told me it's different and I
Correct.
agreed to let my kids
Yes.
go.
This is the murky stuff, because this is our program
Yeah.
connecting with another program. So that's where, yeah, and so probably the best we can do is vet it with the parents, get permission with the parents, and then make sure that this is a short distance from the school to the museum and back.
But,
Yeah.
like, what if their policy is more strict?
What was the stricter one?
Yeah.
You can never go wrong with a stricter one.
Right, I would say too, if their policy is stricter, then just follow their policy. Yeah, I think our challenge is, what if their policy is loosey-goosey?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And then we're struggling. If it's stricter, we're covered, right?
But then should we, you just follow their policy.
Follow, yeah. If you're going with your youth under another program or another church, you need to, as best you can, submit to that policy. If it's stricter, reasonably, as long as it works, right? I think the challenge comes when they're really loose or have no policy. Then I think if there's no policy, then you just impose your own and say, well, our group is going to we're going to travel this way, right?
My other example would be like, for instance, Abundant Springs, they signed off on a form that
Yeah.
gave them permission to post pictures of them.
Yeah.
But a lot of those students didn't sign off that for youth, and then a picture got posted. So does that, on our website, so does that make a difference because it was their policy, or should we be following our policy, especially with our website?
So a youth, a picture of a youth got used that they hadn't approved of?
No, the youth did approve of.
It's an
like,
Abundant Springs picture,
Yeah.
so Abundant Spring registration
Yeah.
forms, they signed off that they
Yeah.
can post their pictures.
Okay,
And so it was used on our website under the youth, but the thing is, a lot of those youth didn't sign off in their youth application that they could have their picture posted.
right.
So
But
is
they
that
signed
a
off in
picture of-
Abundant Springs?
Yeah,
But we don't have that documentation.
So
And
we
it's on-
can't
and
it's
put
on-
a picture on any of
And
our
that's
It's on
why,
our
that's,
website
this
or
is
our
where
website?
I'm struggling, because if you're following everybody else's rules, I'm not seeing any of that paperwork.
right.
Right,
So we can't share that post that Abundance Springs shared because we don't have permission to.
We even, for me,
Advertise
I'm
that
not
picture.
sending my permission form that I sign up for Impact to Bertha
Oh,
as a parent.
right.
But
Right.
if you're running that underneath the EFC, it should be coming.
It should be,
Yeah.
so in case somebody comes back around.
So
Exactly.
actually,
Should be making photocopies now?
that's a good point. So
Yeah.
if possible, what we should do, and this will probably not happen with the kids, it'll happen only with the youth.
Yeah.
What we should do when there's these joint programs or initiatives, we should get copies of those permission slips. Again, to protect ourselves later on. Yeah, that good idea.
Cause it just looks
Yeah.
bad that if Bertha has to go somewhere to get.
She shouldn't have to run after
Exactly. if
getting
something
that. No.
happens. It just makes us look like
Well,
we're
it's
not
not
doing our
enough for
part.
us
Yeah.
to photocopy
Yeah.
them.
It just.
Yeah, good idea. Yeah. And then we also know what was given permission,
Yes.
right? Okay. All right. Travel typically with minimum of 2 screen staff. Use commercial vehicles where possible. Well, that's just to avoid challenges. And if you have youth that have driver's license, make sure that they have a valid driver's license if they're going to drive. Can you imagine the headache if you have a youth offering to drive and has an accident with other youth in the car, and it was a sanctioned youth program? Well, now we have a mess, right? So, proper displays of affection. Yep.
Just one question though, if there's more than 2 youth in one vehicle, is that allowed?
More than 2 youth in one vehicle?
Yeah, like it's, the thing that is often difficult here is that there's 1 student and 1 staff. So if there's 2 youth per staff, is that okay?
Well,
This is also another very gray, because somewhere in a very fine line somewhere it says unless.
right.
And so,
And we're not driving 15 passenger vans. That's the thing.
no.
So you don't always have room for
But
2
I'm-
staff and the kids that you have along.
But I'm thinking, she's thinking more along the lines on one-on-ones, going for coffee, going
Right.
reading, whatever.
But
So
like
they
a
get 2.
Jill and Emma type thing out or something.
Yeah.
Versus the.
Yeah, it's not supposed to be a regular occurrence.
Okay. And I would say document and hand in the document. I took this student here between this time and this time on this day, and we did this.
Students, I'm talking about more than 1 student.
Yeah, and there too. Just I would say document
Like,
it.
so if we have small groups twice a year and we
Yeah.
only have 1 leader per small group and they have a vehicle that can fit their entire small group, that's okay.
If we document and get parental
Yeah.
permission.
I would say if you document and get parental permission, because how else are you going to get the kids home?
Okay, I will read to you
Yep.
the notes
Yep.
I have from our August 30th
Okay.
meeting last year. Ernie and I had a conversation on how to handle this situation. All paperwork must be filled out and turned in. Ministry leads should talk to Ernie and papers signed beforehand. So he has to sign off on you guys,
So if you have off-site trips or whatever,
yeah, and plan on only having one
one leader.
per
Yeah.
2,
Yeah.
yes.
So for instance, I don't know if it was last year or 2 years ago, but Robin was gonna go to Winnipeg to the Forks with some youth. Well, she talked to me beforehand, so I knew. So now I had her back, cause I knew about it, right? And then she submits a report. Okay, so again, even ministry leads, you need to cover your back by, following a protocol like that. Yeah, I think if you're gonna do stuff like where isolation increases, or you're just with a bunch of youth and one leader, document and get parental permission. Like you say, with small groups going home, you don't have enough sponsors and big enough vehicles to have all of your youth kids in your small group plus your sponsors in that vehicle. So
I know we talked a lot about youth and child
Yep.
and stuff, but going back to even what Lester said earlier with seniors now. I've picked up Maureen before,
Mhm.
brought her to church.
Yep.
I guess I'm not really supposed to do that.
No.
Technically, no, Kevin.
And so we pick up Alma Brandt to take her
Yeah.
to an appointment.
Yeah, I've brought Elma to an appointment too.
But that has nothing to do with the church. We just do this as.
Well, that's where that line is.
That's-
Where's
yeah.
that line that it's me picking her up as a friend versus picking her up as a program?
Because the church isn't organizing that you pick her up. You're
Because the
doing that.
church isn't what?
Organizing it. Like if Ernie, say there's an organization,
Yeah.
a sign up sheet or whatever, then you would need that extra permission. But as a friend to a friend, you don't need that.
So like Lester, who is the leader of the seniors of our church, he has to be more careful with that because he's that leader, or?
Technically, yes.
Well, it depends.
I know it's a tough, and I,
Is it an organized
Event.
event? If
I'm-
it is, if you're just going to go and visit, if you're,
again, it's a gray line.
Yeah.
like,
Technically, it's a gray line.
no, it isn't.
It's the visitation program of the church you went to visit, right? Yeah, it's.
Yes.
I think for myself, I'll often keep it in my calendar that I did something, like I'll have it in my calendar, picked up
Yeah.
Alma. So now to me, that's kind of documented, I picked her up. And Lynn knows that I'm going to pick her up, Alma knows that she's asked me to go pick her up. That's my
Well, I guess if you guys,
process of
you can
thinking
do
it through.
what has happened sometimes with youth, if there's a texting, whatever, group, whatever,
Group chat, yeah.
snap, I can't talk.
No, no.
Just a screenshot.
Screenshot.
Screenshots are taken
Yeah.
and printed out.
Just so there's documentation on the church side, so if someone were to see you with Maureen, you're protected and they can't start rumors or whatever, because the church still knows, it's not something you're hiding, because this is the world we live in now.
I think what we're gonna, I would be comfortable with saying, when we're talking about an official program of the church, these are the protocols. So when we're talking about seniors Bible study and Lester as part of seniors exec, that's a program. So then when Lester brings somebody home regularly from that seniors Bible study, that would be considered a vulnerable
Yep,
adult,
I agree.
then he would be well served in filling out a report and handing it in to protect himself. But in your case with this, I would say no. So we're talking about programs like youth, children's church, seniors, whatever.
Yeah, like I'm still being cautious
Yep,
when I do it, that
Yep.
somebody knows that it's just thinking.
Oh man, almost 8 o'clock. I wasn't watching the clock. Okay, I'm gonna start going here. Proper display of affection. You can hold a crying preschooler. You should speak at eye level. Put your arm around a shoulder. Pat hand, shoulder, or back to affirm. But there are inappropriate displays of affection, like kissing or coaxing someone to kiss you, engaging in extended hugging and tickling, holding someone's face, touching in any area covered by a bathing suit, carrying an older child, or engaging in prolonged physical contact or any form of corporal punishment. So I'm Latin, so like my love language is touchy-feely. I have to watch myself that I don't just put my arm around people. And I mean nothing by it, but I have to rein myself in and watch myself because that's not acceptable, right? So you want to be careful with that, and especially if you're wired like me, right? Then you have to watch it. Bullying, we'll go past that. I think we all know that we don't really tolerate bullying. Incident reports, write out an incident report, and it won't do to punish the bully for bullying either. Like you can't do that. Technology, I think what we'll talk about here is just the whole use of texting and all of that. Reminder to the youth sponsors, you're allowed to disseminate information, but any other kind of counseling or that kind of stuff, the fact is that if you're texting a kid late in the evening and they're emotionally distraught or whatever it is, that's not an open door. So what I suggested last time was that you say to the first text you get, say, look, we can have this conversation, but to protect both you and me, we need to pull in a third party and make this a group chat between three of us. Who do you want? In other words, if it's a female texting a female youth leader, maybe they'll say, well, this other female youth leader, and now it's the three of you, okay? So in other words, what I'm saying is avoid counseling after hours using your phone because you're going to run into trouble, okay? And I think we know that there are certain things that require reporting immediately. If somebody's suicidal, you don't say, well, I'll talk to you tomorrow. Get back to me when you feel better, okay? Photography, we already mentioned that. That you have to be careful with that. I used to cringe when I was Dean of Student Development, when the girls would have a slumber party in the dorm and then they would post pictures. That would always make me cringe because of our world, the pictures that get put online, even if you don't mean anything by it. Okay, I'm gonna just slip through here really quick because we're 2 minutes away from 8 o'clock. Here are the categories of abuse: physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional, neglect, spiritual, and financial. And you need, I mention this because you need to be watching with your youth and with the children in case they show signs of being abused. And write incident reports. Don't call Child and Family Services at the drop of a hat. You need to be looking to see what's going on. Also sexual abuse can happen either at home or elsewhere for the children or the youth. There again, look for indicators that would indicate that somebody is being abused, and then document. I want to get through this here. Sorry. 3 means of discovery. Disclosure is where a child, a youth, or a vulnerable adult confides in you that they're being abused. And if there's disclosure, you have a duty to report. Okay? You actually don't get to decide whether it's worth reporting or not, especially if it's a child or a youth underage. Vulnerable adult, you would encourage them to report it if they see themselves being able to do that, but you have an obligation for a child or youth to report. An accusation is made that someone is being abused inside or outside your organization. What would you do there?
Report to my ministry lead.
That's what I would do. I would talk to my ministry lead. And you would want to follow up that allegation as well. And then suspicion based on indicators, and this is where these incident reports and irregular behavior come in. Is there a pattern that seems to suggest that there's abuse? And there what you would do is you'd ask non-leading questions. So here are some indicators of abuse. Injuries for which there's no explanation, or it doesn't fit the story. Injuries at different stages of healing, injuries that have a pattern or look like they've been caused by an object, bruising in unusual places, or unusual fear, aggression, rage, or tantrums. So just kind of acting out, or repeated signs of injury in places that they maybe shouldn't be having injuries. Okay? Changes in personality or behavior, withdrawing from family and friends and activities, poor self-esteem, or age-inappropriate sexual play or sexual knowledge. That might indicate abuse. Sexually intrusive behavior to other children, extremely secretive or unexplainable developmental setbacks. All of those could be indicators, okay? Frequent psychosomatic complaints, forbidden contact with other people, extreme or excessive behavior, evidence of inadequate care, persistent hunger or poor nutrition. Those would be indicators of neglect. Foraging or hoarding or stealing food, also neglect. Unusual bank account activity, that would probably be like a vulnerable adult being abused. So like I said, there's two different responses. You report child abuse and you respond to vulnerable adult abuse. In other words, with a vulnerable adult, you try to encourage them to report instead of you reporting. Okay. I'm gonna jump through here. I would say if you have suspicions, let's say we're talking youth program and you have suspicions, talk to your ministry lead. I'm guessing, I don't know, but I'm guessing you frequently have a short powwow after youth to just debrief or whatever. That'd be a good opportunity for you to raise an observation, see if the others saw it as well, but then also document. And here, again, we follow some fairly strict protocol in terms of what happens next. Only one person would speak to the media, and there, it would either be me or I delegate somebody, like maybe Kevin, as elder chair, but it would be somebody that would be picked to speak for the church, not everybody chatting. You want to respect the privacy of both the person who has supposedly been abused and the person who supposedly did the abuse. Okay. Any questions? I think we started 4 minutes late, so I think I'm still okay. Any final questions? I think this is just something that we're trying to develop a mindset. I would encourage you to write out incident reports, even if you think it's minor. Do the documentation, get it to Bertha ASAP, permission slips, attendance records, etc. Let's make sure that on that end, on the documentation, we're excelling. And then also let's keep working at the supervision. And if you see stuff like physically with our physical building and grounds or whatever that need attention, then point that out to the trustees or to Bertha, and she would relay that to the trustees so that we can make adjustments. Okay?
And any incident reports or any other reports, there is a binder in every classroom that you can always go and look to see, to get your information or to refresh during the year. So all that is in a binder in every classroom. So.
And empty forms are in there as well?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think
And
those binders have
of,
everything.
And a little bit of a first aid kit, Band-Aids, that kind of thing.
And by the way, if you give out a Band-Aid or a Tylenol, there should be an incident report. That's an incident. So if your binder is suddenly without Band-Aids at the end of the year, there have been no incident reports, something's not adding up. Right? Good, thank you for giving us this precious hour of your evening.